I'm just as bad. Oh man. Okay. So yeah, there's just a couple of things we want to sit down and talk about here today, man. It's just, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Again, thank you so much, Rob, for having me on as well. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, my name's Dan Draper. I am a radio presenter, a content generator, mental health advocate, and podcaster as well. So I run my own mental health podcast.
Oh, did I lose you there?
Still there?
Yeah, you're still there. I thought I lost you there. Yeah. So so really, why I wanted to get you on, really. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the pods and how we do them, but essentially we like to just focus on a number of different topics, some of them being more lighthearted and some of them being a bit more, serious, in my opinion, like men's mental health, especially.
Yeah.
I know it's a topic which it's been spoke about for a while, and it has been spoke about, but has it actually been implemented in a way where is actually we're seeing the benefits of it? And I don't know about yourself, but actually let me ask you that, man. Do you think it's really taken as seriously as it is advocated in the media?
First initial response is I don't think so, because I think that we've got a lot better at talking about mental health. We really have, whether it's men's, women's, whatever it may be. I think that the awareness and, with the various lockdowns that's happened with COVID and stuff like that, and how it played such a toll on people's mental health. I really think that actually where the media have made such a big campaign about it, but also just, people in general, just talking about it a lot more, has actually kind of released the stigma a little bit. But I think, specifically for men's mental health, where things are getting back to normal now and stuff like that, it's just a case of, oh, should we go down the pub and watch the football or watch a rugby or something like that, rather than actually thinking, so how have you been, mate? Like, how's things been for you? It's been a rough couple of years. What's, what have you, how have you been? What's been going on? Like, we need to have more of those conversations around like what and how, rather than just sort of brushing it under the carpet, which again, unfortunately, a lot of men are doing at the minute.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think for me is what I've noticed myself is that a lot of men don't really have the safe level of spaces where they can talk about certain things and openly and without judgment. And sometimes at the moment, we're in a bit of a society where if things want to be expressed, if they don't formulate with the status quo, then it has to be cancelled, or it has to be shamed, or it has to be toxic. At the moment, all I ever hear at the moment, to be honest with you, is toxic masculinity. Yeah. But to me, I'm like, everything masculine based on what you're saying is toxic, but that doesn't make sense. And to counteract that, there is real toxic femininity. Like, it's a real thing. Like, I hate to put it as that. So it's just, at the moment, there seems to be a quite a big attack, almost from all angles, if I'm honest with you, when it comes to things like this. And it just makes me think a lot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think the other flip side of that as well is that if, for example, you're emotionally intelligent enough as a guy to realize your feelings and, what it is that you're talking about, you then get called wet or a bit soft or something like that, like you're the person that you're trying to be the better version of yourself. And then some people then be like, oh, come on, mate, so stop being such an idiot about it. And it's that bit that you kind of think, well, you want to be encouraging this type of, you want to be encouraging the positives rather than just thinking about the negatives and saying, oh, actually, mate, you need to man up. That's the worst phrase for me.
Yeah.
I hate the phrase man up so much.
Yeah, and it's one that we still hear a lot of. And I do. But when it comes to things like this and it comes to expressing it amongst people, where do you, speaking for maybe yourself or just in your experience of what you've learned, do you feel like you're able to have that discussion amongst men, or do you feel vulnerable talking about it with women as well?
I think both, to be honest with you, mate. I think that I'm more comfortable now talking to my guy mates about it, especially since, starting all the work that I have done with the podcast and everything like that. I'm far more open about talking my own mental health now, because I think that, and I'm sure that we'll get onto it later about where my struggles began. But I think that where, so many people again, like I said earlier about the guys brushing it under the carpet, so many people are doing that when it takes that one person to turn around and say, oh, actually, mate, yeah, I'm not feeling the greatest. And it's like, okay, well, tell me about it, man. And you've got to be that friend. You've got to be that brother, that cousin, that whoever it may be, that will just try to open up that conversation and just say, look, we need to have a chat. We need to talk about this, because otherwise, you see some of the statistics that come out of, people taking their own life and people who have attempted and stuff like that. And I know that I've had hundreds of conversations, even away from the podcast, about people that have, said to me, I was in a really bad spot, and I either listened to your pod, or I listened to another mental health pod, or I started practicing mindfulness and stuff like that. And honestly, man, it's so good. But again, we just need to keep releasing that stigma. And the same with medication as well. We need to keep releasing that stigma.
So with medication, what do you mean in sense of medication and the stigma around medication?
So there was one girl that I spoke to actually on the pod called Ashley, and she was basically saying that she felt that there was a stigma around the medication that she was taking for her mental health. But she said, if you were sat in a room and, for example, you've got Jack in the corner, you've got Doris over here, you've got so over there. Jack's taking an antihistamine because he's got hay fever. Yeah. Doris is taking an indigestion tablet because she's had something hard, bad for lunch. So-and-so's got a headache or whatever it is. There's no taboo around those because they're medical things that you actually think are going to help you at that point in time. But if you then take something like, something for your mental health or for your anxiety or something like that, it then gets branded as this bigger thing because it's not bought over the shop counter or something like that. And because it's related to mental health, which again has such a big stigma around it, so many people will say, oh, what is that? Like I've heard people before, and again, I would never ever say anything like this. Like I've heard people say, oh, they're taking their crazy pills, or they're taking their this, that, and the other, and stuff like that. And if we were back in like the 90s or something like that, when we grew up with cartoons that would be labeled with things like that or something like that, you could kind of understand it. But it's kind of, at this point, it was in the 2020s, so you kind of have to keep up with the times with that and move on where your language is at. And I think that's the biggest thing is the language surrounding mental health as well, because I feel like at times the word depression just gets thrown out there quite a lot. And people genuinely are depressed. If someone says that they're depressed because they got shortchanged a $5 or something like that, that's everyone's struggle is completely different. But if you've got somebody who's depressed, and like I said earlier, if they're in a really rough spot and they're thinking of taking their own life and things like that, you can just overuse some of the words that come with mental health. And again, it just waters it down, and it makes mental health then not a big thing to talk about when actually it really is. So yeah, I think it's really careful about the language that people use around mental health as well.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. For me, it's my biggest. For myself, I'm fortunate enough to have a good close group of male friends who I can share this kind of stuff about and how to, and being emotionally aware enough to realize what my emotions are and what they mean and why I feel like this. But I know a lot of people don't have those advantages as well. And I think from my perspective, my experiences from some of the people that I know, especially when it comes to say, especially come to sort of like young males, specifically like young Black males or mixed race and those kind of ethnic minorities, I know that they feel a lot more restricted when talking about this, especially on top of the stigma of it doesn't exist, like depression doesn't exist, or this doesn't exist, or man up, like you said. And then the kind of almost, how would you describe it, the persona or that's given around strength and just the traditional male attributes that people say they should have. It just completely changes a lot, and it plays with people's mind as well. I know I'm not really explaining it in a great way. I'm just trying to like get all my thoughts out,
but I completely get what you mean, man. Yeah, I completely get what you mean, because it's that thing again. It's how we've all grown up. We've grown up with that masculinity of you need to be big, strong, look after your woman, that type of thing. When actually there's a lot more to it now because there's so many more resources available. And again, we're shifting with the times. So there's a lot of things that, that were maybe 40, 50 years ago that just are completely different now.
That's true. But then this is where I struggle though, is because I think there's a way of being aware of your emotions, being aware of your mental health, understanding it's just as important as your physical health. But then do you think there's a point where it becomes a little bit too much in regards to some people become too emotionally embedded, and it just kind of overtakes them, where it affects them in a way where it's not containable or controllable,
Yeah, I think so. I think that there is certain elements of that. And I mean, I'm not a medical professional in any way, shape or form. So if anyone, needed to speak about their mental health with a medical professional, then they should absolutely do so. But I think that you're right. I think that there's some people that will be there that will have their own struggles. And there'll be people that will have, they'll share their struggles in a different way, or they may not have their own struggles at all. They may just want something from someone, and that's their way of reaching out to people. So yeah, I think that every in terms of the struggle side of it and raising their attention and their awareness about the subjects could be completely different. I mean, you could have someone who is either that you work with or that whatever it may be, and you just say, oh, look, they're kicking up a fuss again, or, oh, there's Karen, those famous names like Karen and Keith. But actually, they may have a point with some of it, and you have to kind of take yourself back from that. And I've learned that a lot recently, working within customer service and hospitality and things like that. Is that you really need to think about how it is that you approach people, because if you just go, oh, do you know what? I don't think that I'm up for that today. You can deal with that one, or this, that, and the other. That you don't know then how that it could affect someone's life completely differently. And I'm not saying that we need to pander to everybody and everybody's whims and wishes, but it's just that consideration piece. Because again, as we were talking about earlier before we came on about social media nowadays is so self-involved with a lot of different things, and it sends people into a real frenzy at times. There's so many young girls now that are talking about body dysmorphia and all of this, not only through like modeling and stuff like that, but you see people on TikTok and whatever it may be. But it's the same with guys, the eating disorders for guys, the statistics of that has gone up. And again, that's because you'll have, and again, fair play to them, they're all in great shape, but you'll have like the Chris Hemsworth of the world, and you have the Captain Americas and this, that, and the other, because it's a lot of Hollywood has been dominated by like the superhero world recently. So for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I like a pint or two. I'll have a drink. I'm not going to say I'm anywhere near Chris Hemsworth, but then you then start to think about your complex as well and how you're kind of going from there.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad you brought it up actually in regards of sort of body dysmorphia, body positivity, because I had this conversation with someone at the moment recently. And she's like a body positivity advocate, and I was saying to her, I don't really believe body positivity is for men, and I'll explain why. Because I think it's only a luxury that women have, because what you'll find is the way, perfect example, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but I'm sure you see that obviously Dr. Dre was performing Eminem, 50 Cent, and 50 Cent did that same scene he did, right? Hanging off, right?
Yeah.
As you know, and people just dragged him. He's fat, he's this. First of all, he's like 50 years old, right? So he's been in shape pretty much all of his life, right? And then on top of that, if that was reversed, or even you don't even have to say it was reversed, even just if you look at the way people talk about Lizzo compared to 50 Cent, like, you couldn't say what they were saying about 50. And when I mean they, I mean like whoever was talking about it, social media.
Yeah, the keyboard
blogs,
warriors, yeah.
Right, whatever. So people, there would no way you'd be able to say the same thing about a woman they did about 50 Cent and not get dragged through or cancelled or anything like that. And I just think I think it's stupid, because the reason why I say that so bluntly is because if you're making it about it, make it across the board, because we're all for equality. Me personally, I love everyone. I want everyone to be equal. Do you know what I mean? And it's difficult when you see things like that and then still say that this is equal and this is fair and this isn't fair and this is men's fault and this is women's fault. It's like, it's never going to get any cohesion if you don't stick to that. And that is what I was saying to even, look, I've had conversations with people who I'm obviously not going to hot up on here, but they were saying about guys, they're like, oh yeah, but first thing, but he's out of shape. So, and these are women talking about guys. They're like, oh, well, he's out of shape. But you couldn't really just freely say that about women. And some guys might not care. And I always like to say anyway, when it comes to dating and all these other things, I go, my friend described it perfectly, actually, shout out Dan Blake. He said that guys can be 5 with accessories, which means you can be short, but you can be rich and have a good fashion sense. Or you could be a bigger guy, but you could be funny and you can have a nice guy. Do you know what I mean? So, but that's the luxury of that doesn't need to really apply to, you know, the other gender and stuff. So I just thought that was really interesting, because that, to me, that was the point I'm trying to make. Is Mario's in the chat. How you doing, Mario? What's up, man? Good to see you, man. So it's getting some messages here on Twitch. How you doing there, Mario? So my thing was that essentially is that I use that example just to say that body positive isn't across the board like that. Like, it isn't for men like it is for women. And that's fine. I accept that. It's got nothing to do with me. But the way people highlight someone like Lizzo and then they're telling DJ Khaled to put a shirt on, I'm like, is it pick and choose, you know?
I think that's the thing. And you know, for me personally, and you were saying there about dating and stuff like that, like I'm just like, you know what, I can't at the minute. Like, for me, I'm like, do you know what, I'm gonna just work on myself and work on my presenting, like I said to you before. But there is part of me that where I'm like, oh, do you know, like, because we were talking about someone that we knew about some content that they were putting out, and it really did affect me. It really affected me in kind of a way that I was like, do you know what, I've just come out of a relationship that was a really loving relationship at the time, and all I'm seeing is you just shaming people constantly, and I was just like, what is this? Is this what being single in like 2021 is going to be like now? Like, do I need to get myself a 6-pack? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And then everything, and I hate this word, and I know that it's come from the Love Island scene, but everything's an ick nowadays as well.
Oh, the ick,
man,
ick.
Honestly,
ick, man, you hit the nail on the head.
Honestly, like everything's an ick, and you're just like, well, what's the point, man? Like, what do I? What am I here?
You know what is it's funny actually. We're streaming this on Twitch right now, in fact, and I've got a community on Twitch that I've spoken to for months and months and months, and I'm hearing a lot of feedback from the guys on Twitch, and they feel like they are, because of how things are with social media and when it comes to dating, women's feedback and all that kind of stuff, they feel like they're not enough, and they feel like they have to become less so she can become more. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. You need to, if you want to be in a loving relationship and a relationship of equality in some degree, then you have to, you know, compromise, like we said before. You have to respect each other and all of that, and that doesn't come from pedestalizing one person over the other. So what I advise to young men especially is like, look, there's plenty of time. There's plenty of time. They're not, like I always say, they're never going to stop making women. So focus on being the best possible version of yourself. Make sure you take care of your physical health, your mental health. Make sure you focus on your finances, you know, learn skills, you know, be where you want to be in your career and grow that way and become an interesting dude. And it's never gonna, you're never gonna not meet women if you know, especially if you know yourself on a mental point as well, and knowing how things work and dynamics work, you'll be fine. Like, men don't really hit their peak until they're like mid to late 30s anyway. So I've got a couple years left to go. But so it's just a different, I believe in having a different sort of attitude. And like, when I start having kids and sons especially, I'll be saying to them, look, don't worry, there's plenty of time. Because also that stops you, it'll save you time, because then it'll stop you getting into relationships that may not be good for you, toxic relationships, people taking advantage of each other and that sort of thing, and accidentally getting people pregnant and shit. Like, you don't want that. So
exactly. But
so
do you know what? That's such a good point though, because I think that for me, when I grew up, and my town where I used to live when I grew up was a really kind of small town mentality. Like every time that I go back now and I say, oh yeah, like I'm doing this bits for presenting and I'm doing this for radio and I'm doing XYZ for blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my God, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what have you done? They were like, oh, well, I've had another kid. And I'm like, right, okay, fine. But then every time that I'll go home, it'll be, a grandparent, it'll be this, that and the other. And it'll be like, so Daniel, when and now being, single, they're like, when are you going to meet someone? When are you going to settle down? You're not getting any younger. You're not doing this. And, you kind of then sit there and you're just like, wow, well, if I wasn't feeling rubbish before.
Yeah. But the thing is, you shouldn't. And I think, to be honest with you, I don't think that's a really fair thing to say to someone of your age and what you're doing. And it's this very traditional view. I'm like I'm married, and that's a traditional view, traditional setup, but that doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do in regards to being the kind of person I am, in regards to my development personally and professionally. But I think that it's just, especially that kind of generation, like grandparents and maybe parents, they feel like, okay, that's how you get your life set. That's how you get your life in order. And I feel like if your life isn't chaos, it doesn't matter. If your life isn't chaos and you have the direction of what you're doing, what you're going, you will meet someone when it's the right time for you to meet someone. And fortunately, we have the advantage that we're men, that we can have kids obviously a lot later into our years. So it doesn't really matter. Like, you can, who's that guy? Like, be like Leonardo DiCaprio, man. He could be he's not having no kids, be on yachts with supermodels, man. It could be you. Could be you, man. Could be you.
Oh man, I'll keep dreaming, but yeah.
That's what I mean. And that's only from obviously that's a exaggerated point, but that's only from developing yourself as a person. And that takes us through to what we're speaking about, mental health and all this kind of stuff. Because if you're not in a good space mentally, it's not right for you to get into a relationship anyway.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, mate.
It's not fair to yourself or anyone else, So I think these things are, I think a lot, and what I find as well, a lot of guys do need a lot of guidance at the minute, man. And it's important for platforms like yourself and doing what you do. I think that's super, super important, which is why I wanted to have you on, because I want to be able to share what you know and your experience with the kind of platform I have, because fortunately I've met a lot of people who have these struggles, and I'm not really qualified to talk about it in such depth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I only know the basic, and I can be a bit blunt. I mean, I'm not going to be telling anyone to man up. I'm just like, look, man, focus on this, do this, and it'll be fine. But it's not a cookie cutter, as they say, formula, is it? So I think knowing what you do and knowing the people that you speak to, you have more of an overview of how to not manage it and like lecture or preach to anyone about it, but at least give them some sort of knowledge based on what you've experienced. Because how did you come to this stage where you decided to do this podcast? And did you have anything in your own personal background in mental health where you thought, look, I want a platform? I'm really curious how you got to that, actually.
Yeah, man. So I think for me, like it all started in the first lockdown, if I'm honest with you, because I mean, I got made redundant from an office 9-to-5 job. I was working in a pub at the time. And then that COVID hit, we got locked down. And I think because COVID was so new, nobody really knew how to deal with it, and they didn't know what it was. And, the fact that we were being told to stay indoors, we weren't allowed to see our friends, our family, our loved ones, anything like that. And then, it really affected people's mental health. And I've said this story a few times, is that the big catalyst for me starting the podcast, because for years people had said to me to get into, TV, radio. Some people said I had a face for radio. I was like, thank you. But then they were like, oh, why don't you do a podcast? And I was like, oh, okay. So it's always been in the back of my mind, but I thought, office 9-to-5, I need to pay rent, I need to get bills paid and all that lot. And it was only when I heard from my football boys back home, and it was, again, a small town mentality at the time. Some of the guys have got kids and this, that, and the other, and that's how they want to live their lives. But it was just the weird texts that I was getting, and it was only weird because they're such blokey blokes, if you like they wouldn't say boo to a goose if it was anything to do about how they're feeling or whatever it is, but they're happy to talk about how Jamie Vardy's banged in 3 goals in a game. So when COVID hit, and my group chat for the boys was like, guys, how are we? Like, what's going on? Like, is everyone okay? How's your families? Is everyone all right? Has anyone caught it? That for me. And then there was just one guy that in the group that said, do you know what, boys? I'm really struggling, and I'm really struggling with my mental health. And I just went, bang. That's the eureka moment that I need to start talking about this, because I had my own struggles previously. And I know how hard it is, especially when you get into that place, because it's just terrible. So if you can't have that core network of people that you can talk to about it, and again, us football boys, we were like family, man, like we were always gonna talk about anything and everything that we could. But you never spoke about things like that because you had to be the manly macho kind of drinking pints kind of guy. And yeah, so I mean, it all stemmed from there. And then I started it. I started talking about, what did I talk about? I started talking about COVID and how it affected me a little bit. And then I started interviewing a few people, and I interviewed some great people at the beginning. One of my friends who runs a community farm and how that helps people's mental health. I spoke to an ex-professional footballer because it was blown up by my local news Instagram account here, which was lovely. So he then got in contact, and it was around the time that George Floyd was murdered. So we were talking about racism in the game, and we were talking about racism in general, and I went to him and said, look, I really want to talk about this because it's a really passionate subject for so many people at the minute, but also I want to know how it's affected you. And it's the same. I've got a comedian who's a person of color, and we're going to talk about, being a black comedian, because, it's completely different to being a white comedian. So it's those types of things. And then it just kind of went on and on and on. And I was just like, actually, do you know what? This is pretty cool. I quite like talking about the conversations. I love doing interviews like this and everything. And then I was like, okay, well, why don't you speak to your local radio station, see if they're interested in it? So they got me on for an interview and played a couple of clips, which was lovely. And then the radio station then took me on as a presenter. So I'm now one of their main presenters there. But I've spoken to some incredible people, and it's also been, broadcast on the BBC. It's been broadcast on so many different platforms, and I'm so grateful for it, because it's allowed me to get some of the guests that I've had on, such as, who have I had on? Vic Hope, Lee Ryan, Will Manning, Melvin O'Doom, Marvin Sordell is an incredible guy, ex-Premier League footballer, quit the game early due to mental health, and now is an ambassador for Better, who's one of the mental health charities that look after like the podcast and a load of people and stuff. So for me, it's just opening up that conversation, because I've always been a talker. And again, it comes from my Essex side of the family. We're just chatters. We just love talking. But yeah, I just think that it's so important to chat. And I've always been that kind of in the room of people that would be the lager drinkers who don't talk about anything, that will go do this, that, and the other. I've always been the one that will kind of be like, yeah, but how are you, mate? Like, what's going on? Like, I'll always try and dig.
It's funny you say that, actually, because you just said, actually, when you're speaking, is that it just kind of, he said, oh, I'm struggling. And the problem is it's about that starting point. It just needs someone just to say something, and then people feel comfortable saying something else, I find. So even if it's just on topic, like you're saying, you might be able to talk about football all day, every day. But then if someone says, look, I'm having a bit of a hard day, someone else might chime up and be like, you know what, actually, I'm kind of feeling the same. Because I think people are a little bit pensive to be that vulnerable, even with their close friends. And you don't know, we know how groups of guys are. I mean, the group, I can't show you my group chat, it's wild. But the fact that people might think, okay, people are going to take the piss out of me. People are going to be like, oh, shut up, man. And then you feel, if all it takes is for someone to do that, and then you don't feel comfortable mention it again, and it gets worse, and so on and so forth. But that was really interesting when you said, literally, it was just, that was, like you said, described it there, a eureka moment. It did seem like that, because it just changed the game really for the dynamics in your friendship group.
Yeah, exactly, man. And do you know what? Like, I mean, for me, I gained a whole new family once I went through my mental health struggles as well, because my struggles basically began when I was traveling and I was having the best time of my life, and then I got a phone call from my dad to say that unfortunately that one of our close family friends, who at the time was 30 years old, had passed away due to cancer.
Oh,
So and that was a really close family friend. And then a couple of days later, I then got a phone call to say that, and this is whilst I'm in Vietnam, and one of my friends had been spiked and had taken something. So we're in a Vietnamese hospital. I've taken a phone call, and my nan had passed away. So I was like, right, okay. So at least I've got a couple of weeks before the funeral. I'll try and rush around and do a few bits, and then I'll come back, depending on what's going on. And then I got another phone call once I was in the mountains in Sapa, which was absolutely beautiful in Vietnam. But I got another phone or a text to say, Daniel, can you talk? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Just thought it was a general catch up. And they said, Dean's not very well. Now, Dean, for a bit of context, was my cousin who I grew up with. And we were, so close. We were inseparable. We're only 9 days apart. We're more like brothers. And they said Dean's collapsed on the rugby pitch. And I just went, right, I'm packing my bags and I'm coming home. It wasn't even a consideration for me. I rang through to Emirates and I said, look, I need to get home. I'm supposed to come home from Thailand, but I'm actually going to come home from Vietnam now. Don't care about the cost. Just get me home today, basically. And and then afterwards, after that time, I'd packed up, I'd said bye to my friends that I was traveling with and everything like that. It took me 6 hours to get from this sort of mountainous, beautiful area into the city center where the airport was. And all along the way, I'm just kind of going, please, God, like, please help him, like, make sure he's safe and all that lot. And it turned out when I got to the airport that what had happened is that I FaceTimed my mum because she said, ring me, not your uncle or his wife at that time. And I rang her and I saw that she was upset and I went, oh my God, like what's wrong? Like, is he okay? Is he, because I thought that there was just a complication with the surgery and he's had to have something done or whatever it was. And what had happened is that his heart, and you wouldn't have noticed it unless you had this one particular test done, his heart he had one less valve than he should have done. So basically his heart had overworked itself and the lactic acid that was in his, because he was playing rugby, had shut most of his organs down. Now that they'd saved him, but then what had happened is the lactic acid shut most of his organs down. And that meant that he passed away. So I've then found this out in a cafe, on FaceTime to my mum. And at that point, I didn't know how to control my emotions. And for me, I just kind of slammed my hands on the table. And unfortunately, a glass then fell off the table, which then meant that there was 6 Vietnamese police officers that came over with guns drawn because they thought I was kicking up a fuss because it's an airport.
Right.
And then I just bawled my eyes out. And then I almost missed my flight home. I asked, can I have some space for myself? And they were basically like, no, you got your seat, mate. That's it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then luckily, they were fantastic. Luckily, when I got to the plane, which I almost missed my flight, they were like, oh yeah, like Dan, you must be Daniel. We've got a special area for you. But I cannot rate Emirates enough for that because they were really, really good with it. But I think, for me, then flying home 20 and a half hours through 4 different countries, knowing the news that I knew, and then came back, I kind of cried all my tears out on the plane. I didn't sleep. I just genuinely cried for 20 and a half hours. And when I got back to the UK, it was my 2 sisters and my friend who I was traveling with, who had already come home, who picked me up. And it was kind of like that Love Actually scene from the airport where you kind of run and hug and all that lot. And I just felt numb. And I genuinely felt like that for the next 6 to 9 months. And I just felt literally nothing. Was not motivated to get a job, was not motivated to do anything. It was only when I started thinking about coming up to London and working again that I thought, you know what, actually, you've kind of got to get yourself together a little bit now. You've got to be able to do that. And really just, go from there, basically. But I think, the level of and gravity of losing those people, especially in such a close time frame and being that far away from people, that for me was where it all began. And then since then, I've had other struggles. Like I said to you before, came out of a long-term relationship a little while ago where I thought that person was the one. And that's taken a massive toll as well. I'm still working through things with that. And then just general anxieties, man. Like, you know, everybody needs more rest in the world and stuff like that. But I think that's the thing, like just keeping a check on yourself. And I'm starting to get better with that now.
Jesus, you know, man. Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because that sounded like a difficult, a bit of an understatement experience to go through, and I'm glad you felt comfortable enough sharing that with me. Because to have that, just that point, I want to say, but that point when you said that 6-9 months, you just felt completely, you know, completely down, to use of a better word. What kind of support system did you have around you at that time?
So I had my family. I had my family and my friends, but again, in terms of the friendship side of it, because I was living at home at this point, because I'd just come back from traveling, I didn't move out again until a few months later. The support network really is that for the first few months, I would say that, and again, he passed away in the November. So Christmas is always hardest for us because that was a time that we all got together, and me and him especially had a big drink. So I've still got this tradition now. Well, I'll go up to his grave and I will put a bottle of beer on there and write a little message to say, oh, we're keeping up our Christmas traditions, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I'll sit and have a drink with him. And I think that, you know, keeping traditions alive is really important. But I think, as I was saying, you know, those first 3 months, especially, you know, and the worst part about it as well is from his point of view, is that he had a little baby daughter coming on the way as well. So where he never got to meet his daughter, and she would have been the first girl on his side of the family, like the Reed side of the family, to have been born, because it was all boys previously. So he would have broken the mold with that one as well. And I mean, as I said, like, friends were great. They were constantly trying to keep me out and socialize. And I remember around Christmas there was one particular incident, and I was out with my mates, and we were in a pub, and I was out with some of his friends that I'd met from the funeral and stuff like that. I was out with my boys, and they're my closest boys as well. And I just felt really claustrophobic. And again, this was pre-COVID. I felt really claustrophobic because there were just so many people there. And I think because I didn't really want to be around people I didn't really know. And you know me, I'm such a sociable guy. Like, I love being out and about. I love seeing people, love chatting to people. But for me at that point, I was just like, I don't want to be anywhere near anyone. So I ended up really genuinely having a bit of a panic attack outside. And it was only for one of my friends was like, Dan, do you want to go for a cigarette? No, I'm not a smoker. But he was like, Dan, do you want to go for a cigarette? And I was like, oh, no, I'm all right, mate. I don't smoke. He went, no, come outside. And I was like, okay. And it was when he noticed it. And he said, you do realize it's okay for you not to be here. And as soon as he finished that sentence, I literally flooded with tears. And he basically had to catch me. Like, I just collapsed into him and was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be out. I just want to be in bed. I just want to stay here. This is all I want. All I want is all I want is Dean back, and this, that, and the other. Because again, we were like brothers. But I ended up, we sat outside for a while. I ended up staying for the rest of the night, which was good for me, because then I actually got to swap kind of stories about what I didn't know about Dean's life, in terms of like more like the rugby side of it, and when he went on tour and how he knows the boys and stuff like that. So I learned a lot about him through them, and I'm glad that I did it, and I'm glad that I stuck it out, because otherwise I think that it would have just been, for me, it would have just been one of those things that's easy for me to just hide and run away from things. But actually it did me the world of good to get to know another side of him.
Jeez. That's crazy. Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah.
I think I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes and just try to understand all of those kind of emotions you were feeling in such a short space of time, and what they were like. Could you even describe them? Did you, because was it just the overwhelming grief? Was it the sense of loss? Was it just anger? Was it what was it like in all those periods of, like, from when you got on the plane and essentially came home? What were those periods of emotions over that time period?
I think it's a really weird one, because I was traveling, I was having genuinely the time of my life. I think because I was on such a cloud nine, you know, the day before Dean passed away, or the day before that I found out, I went on like a big trek around like this huge mountain range with beautiful scenery around me, and I was like, oh, do you know what? And the place that we were staying with, my me and my friends, we were teaching kids English, so we only got to do that for the night, because they really wanted to learn, and that was part of you staying there, is that you helped out with like the cooking, and you know, you helped the kids learn English and stuff like that. Awesome place, and I would love to go back there. But I think for me, being on such a high, then getting the news of Dean's not very well kind of took me down to maybe an 8. And then finding out the news, you know, that he'd passed away at the airport as well. And again, being so far away, and me and my family are very close. We're very, very close. And for it to just drop down, it dropped, mate. I couldn't tell you the crash that had gone through. And again, I went into a bit of a hysteria, if I'm honest. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I sobbed like a child. Like, you know, when a kid's really, really upset and they kind of try to catch their breath, and like I was doing that at, you know, 25, 26 years old, as a fully grown adult. And I just sort of was like, wow, where has this come from? Where has all this emotion come from? And then again, you know, you then think about it and you're like, well, actually, you've never experienced anything like this. Like I've had people pass away. I had like my granddad passed away a few years ago when I was sort of 17 and all that lot, but I hadn't really at that point really had to deal with too much death, especially like a tragic death, if you like. So for me, I just plummeted, mate. And then it was only when I started to rally in the new year and afterwards, I would say honestly about March of 2019. No, sorry, he died in 2016. So March of 2017, that I would have rallied myself and been like, actually, this is the point now that you've had enough. You've really got to get your ass in gear, basically, and get yourself a proper job and do the things that you want to do, because he wouldn't want you to, you know, hide away from some of the stuff that you're doing. But I think it's interesting what you said there about anger, because I genuinely was angry for a long time, and it was nothing to do with him. That he could have done nothing about it, but I was angry for a long time because he wasn't around. And, you know, when I saw his baby growing up and stuff like that, I was like, I'm angry that you're not here to see your little girl, because she's the spitting image of you and she's got the same personality and, you know, that type of thing. And I think that anger then took me to a darker place, because I was like, well, how can you be angry at someone that's not here? How can you be angry at someone that you love so much that you can't tell them that anymore? How can you be angry at someone that, you know, it was medically not their fault that they couldn't raise their kid and have their family and this, that, and the other? You know, it was, and for me, I came out of it afterwards and I was like, in a way, I was like, that's selfish for me. I was like, that's selfish. Like, you know, everybody grieves in their own different ways. Everybody will do. But for me, I came out of it afterwards and I was like, you need to be the bigger person here. You need to be the person that's like, oh my God, like, you know, she, like, for example, Dean's wife, she's lost her entire world. She's lost everything. And you're angry at the fact that he's not here because you can't, you know, even
I suppose it's different, because what you mentioned there earlier about sort of say losing a grandparent and then losing someone young is such a completely different feeling. Because when it sounds a bit wrong, but when someone's a bit older, you like, especially a grandparent, you kind of, oh, okay, you're more prepared for it in a way. But when it's someone young and it's unexpected, it's funny actually, is because I had a similar situation where, well, not to that extent, of course, but I lost my my cousin, and then a few weeks later I lost like my really good neighbor, and she was like in her 80s plus, and my cousin was 19.
Yeah.
And she had died from like natural causes, and he'd been stabbed and left in the street. And so so it's very, very, very different. Of course, you feel lots of different emotions, because, and like a lot of the ones you've mentioned there actually came to mind. Actually, it made me think back myself to think how, because sometimes you think loads of emotions. If you sometimes feel guilt, sometimes you feel like this like frustration, anger, anxiety, all those kind of ones that you mentioned, because it's I think it's about the loss of control. I don't know about yourself, but me, I can be a little bit of a control guy. So knowing something is out of your control, and something's happened and you couldn't do anything about it, and of course it's toppled with the personal relationship you have with that person, you don't really, these are the only ones we're sort of trained to express. The first ones for men usually is stuff like anger, frustration, and sometimes violence to react. You know, I was having a conversation the other day about how when, say, teenage boys act out, people just think they're just being you know, stubborn or like just being difficult, but it usually comes from a place of, I don't know how to handle my emotions, but I know anger, I feel anger, and this is what I feel, and this is how I react. So I just think that's an important thing. And yeah, that's quite an experience, man, for sure.
Yeah,
just listening to it.
Yeah, I think the thing is as well, and a big takeaway from that is how you control your emotions with that. Because for me, and you mentioned there about aggression and people getting into fighting and stuff, my solace has been that I would get back into exercise or whatever. So I actually then got back into boxing, because for me, that was how I got into, or how I got out of my state that I was in. Because, you know, you had the fitness side of it, but physically being able to let out that anger, not on a person, because I'm not a fighter, I'm not into that. I'm more of a lover than a hater. But
that's the Tinder line. That's the Tinder line.
It's coming soon. But yeah, I think that, you know, being able to have that focus as well and reset yourself mentally, because boxing is really bloody hard when you have to mentally prepare yourself for it. So I think having that reset was something for me that I was like, do you know what, actually, yeah, that's done me the world of good.
Yeah, and I do think like you've just mentioned there, physical exercise. I know people think it's all about, you know, vanity and flexing in front of the mirror or being a beefcake or whatever it is, but it's not really about that. The feeling that you get from the dopamine hit when you have a workout is unmatched. You know, people. It's funny actually. People who are recovering from any kind of addiction, smoking, drugs, anything, drinking, the reason why they go to such extreme lengths into the gym after that, or into fitness in general, is because it's the same level of fix. They get the same release of dopamine into their brain than they would when they were smoke a cigarette or do drugs. So that's why it's a replacement. It's a habit, but it's a better habit.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Couldn't agree with you more.
So that's it. Get wedge or die trying. That's what I believe. Get wedge or die trying. But,
I like that.
To get wedge or die trying. Well, yeah, I think that's one of the best things I can speak about as well. Is just because it's difficult, man. It's not. I think sometimes, and I'm sure you experience yourself, especially with social media, perception of a person isn't always what it seems in real life. So in real life and social media, you know, they're different, and there's a real blurred line there. And I think that plays a lot of part into mental health, because people think they should behave like this because they see this person living like this and behaving like this. So if you don't behave like that, you have feelings of inadequacy, which is interesting. But then you may be guilty of it yourself as an individual, putting out that perspective of someone. And it's only going to get crazy with the metaverse, man.
Man, honestly. But do you know what, going back to what you were just saying there, and I use this analogy a lot, and it really works, because working in hospitality, I see different levels of people. I see people when they come in, I see people when they're okay, and I see people when they're not okay. So I'll see, for example, and I use the analogy, it's like a book. So you would see, for example, them at the beginning of the night, for example, if it's a guy creeping on some of the barmaids, whatever it may be, you look at the back cover where he's been thrown out because he's been too pissed or whatever it may be. But what you don't then look at is the pages in between and what the story is. And what I mean by that is there's one particular guy, and he's happy for me to share the story. I won't say his name, but basically what had happened is that he come in, he got way too drunk. We had to kick him out. He then came back in a little while later because he was so embarrassed. We didn't bar him. He was absolutely fine. But when we spoke to him and when we chatted, because he was such a great regular, you know, he was really lovely, like one of the most honest guys that you could chat to. And basically what had happened is that his missus had split up with him. He was just about to lose his flat and he lost his job all in 3 days. So he'd come out on a bit of a bender with some of the lads. And then that then led to the final part, the back part of the book of him being chucked out. But general perception was that he was coming in, maybe being a bit of a creep, not that he was, but maybe being a bit of a creep because he knew us behind the bar. So he was chatting to us for maybe a bit longer than he should have done. And then he's got thrown out. So then there's customers that have come up to me and like, oh, do you need some help with getting him out or whatever? And I'm like, no, he's absolutely fine. He's absolutely fine. But it's again, that perception, because you've just got to keep scratching away at them layers, whether it's, again, people that you're close with, people that you're not particularly close with, could just be anyone and everyone. And again, it's just about being a good person and just, asking the right questions. And, there's the Roman Kemp's documentary a little while ago was fantastic for this, about asking if you're okay twice. Because if you ask the first time, you're going to get a response of, oh yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, no worries at all. No, but mate, how are you actually? Like, are you okay? Oh, well, actually, mate, I felt a bit down recently. I've not felt myself, blah, blah, blah. And that's the type of thing where it comes in that you're like, yeah, I see where you're coming from now.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, because you're right. It is about perception and understanding, and just what's happening behind the scenes, which is obviously a great way of describing it there, is that it's the same, like, even you go to the point there of saying that having a breakup. Now, your perception of the breakup to me is your perception of it. So she might have a different perception of it. But I think sometimes what happens is when people come out of a relationship and then you hear one side, the other person is painted a certain way just because of that other person's perception. But really, so they're in charge of shaping their reality, essentially. But the point is that you can't make an informed decision and outcome on a situation unless you have both sides. But I think a lot of people now, especially in the culture that we live in, are reactive. And when you are straight reactive, it's just coming from raw emotion. Just, I feel like this, so boom. I feel like this, so boom, 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 boom. And when you behave like that, people can take advantage of that and people can manipulate that. And even I see it every day, where things happen across the world and it's put on social media. Everyone's got an opinion of this because, I feel like this, or this is wrong, or this isn't like this. And they don't realize that people are manipulating that to do something as simple as sell a product or sell an idea or whatever it may be. And I know that people had some views on stuff like COVID, and now obviously some people have some views on the current state of the politics of what's happening in the minute, but it's difficult because you want to be level-headed enough to be like, okay, look, I don't agree with your point, but okay, it's your point. But some people don't have that kind of understanding. They just think that I'm right and I am now going to push my point on you, and that's where the divide comes from. But that's not what it's an argument. That's what an argument is. An argument is essentially like, I believe this and you believe that, and I'm going to try and convince you to believe my argument. And you're going to try and convince me to believe your argument. And it's just going to hit an impasse. So it's always best to just have an understanding of each person's argument. Except, okay, look, I'm not going to agree with you. You're not going to agree with me. But okay, it's an interesting point of view. But that takes a lot of time and a lot of social awareness, self-awareness, emotional control and stuff like that to get to that stage. And I think that the reason why I bring up this point is because I don't believe that we're given the tools to do that. Instead, it makes more sense to just kind of let people run amok, as it were, as opposed to saying, look, it doesn't have to be like this, you could be like this. And this is where a lot of the fragments and issues in society in general come. I mean, for myself, I don't, that's not really how I operate, but I know that some people haven't got some of the benefits I have, and vice versa. So it's just, sometimes it's just work, especially when it comes to men as well. I can't speak for yourself, but younger, I was very reactive, very reactive kind of person, acting off a lot of impulse, really, not really realizing how things looked or how it made the other person feel or anything like that. I just did because I felt like doing it. And on reflection, I always say, look, I'm not gonna say that I regret what I did and those things that I did, but those things that I did have made me the person who I am, and I've learned from them experiences. So I can't go back to my past and change them, but I can at least learn from them and understand. Because I always have a think of, like, if I did something wild, people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I go, yeah, because at the time I thought that suited me, or I thought that was the right thing to do, or I thought in my, just what I'm saying. And it kind of comes with age as well. You can learn more and more about yourself, where you're like, okay, I can't believe I did that, but at least I'm not that person anymore because I've learned from that. So, and it kind of takes me into the point of the idea of cancel culture as well, because people, you're not the same person you was when you were 21, neither am I. So, but people have a tendency to hold people in a point where something you did in the past has to be brought into the future, imagining you're the same person. And even someone said an excellent point to me on the podcast before, which was about the idea of committing a crime. And committing a crime, being put in prison. You're being put in prison off the basis of one act that you've done. At one decision. So you could be put in there, say, at 25 years old, and you're spending 25 years of your life in there because of something you did in one moment, which someone has now judged you for the rest of your life. That's wild. Like, that's when you take it apart, that's really, really wild. Like, when he said that to me, I was just like, Jesus, I've never really thought of it like that. Like, you make one mistake and then that's it. And you're even if you was to come out, you're still tied to that mistake because it's still on your record, it's still on there. There's, even when you think of it on a more of a of a financial level, if you have a CCJ or a bankruptcy on your credit, that stays on there for 6 years. People are not going to let you forget it for a period of time, and it's just people just don't let things go from the sounds of it. You know what I mean?
They hold on, man. They hold on.
Yeah. Jesus, that's really made me think. I don't know. When he told me that, I was like, wow, that's insane. So and I think that's the important thing if we're talking about sort of relationships and people and stuff like that, and giving advice. I think it's just the important thing I always like to say to people now, okay, look, you can do whatever you want, man. You can, she can, he can, whoever. You can do whatever you want, really. But just be aware that every action that you do has consequences and reaction, and however people respond to that, you can't be angry at them for that, because these are just to keep it really simple, like if someone was going to go start an OnlyFans today, that's fine. Do your thing, get your money, make that paper. But in 5 or 10 years, when someone's finding that on there, or you want to go and get married, and a guy that you're marrying knows that, or he finds out about that and he doesn't want to marry you, you can't be angry at him. That's his decision based on that is one of the consequences of a decision that you've made. But I think we live in a world now where it's such an instant gratification society, where people don't think their consequences matter, and there are any consequences. People just think, oh, I can do whatever. Okay, that's fine. But you don't, when people turn around and say, okay, well, I'm not gonna work with you, or I'm not going to get in a relationship with you because of your multiple failed business or your multiple failed relationships, then they get frustrated and angry. But that's childish. It's crazy. It's wild to me.
And it's interesting what you said there, because I feel like it's the same with, again, social media. Everybody's looking for the likes, everybody's looking for this, they're looking for that instant gratification, when actually there's a lot of times that it takes a lot of hard graft, whether it's in your job, whether it's in, what we're doing as presenters, or whether it's just in your own mental health or how you want to live your life. There's always a story to be told. There's always a journey. You're never going to just get that instant, well done, mate. You've got to work hard for it as well.
And that's it. But what you said there, it's like the perception of that it's easy, but people aren't posting their failures. People aren't posting their failures at all. People are only posting the successes. And I think people get lost in the sauce. But you think Instagram's mad, TikTok is crazy. TikTok is mad. Today I seen a live of someone who was born without a jaw. That is crazy. I've never seen that before. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And there's some madness going on in there already, but it's insane when you think of the effect this is having, because I don't know. I don't think I want my kids being on social media, if I'm honest. Because
really, yeah.
Just because of what it does. Is because there hasn't been any kind of form of training of what it does, and there hasn't been enough history of it to realize. Because I mean, when did Instagram come out? I mean, when did Facebook come out? Like 2006?
This was on a pub quiz the other day. Like 2006-ish. Yeah.
So it's been what, 15 years or so of Facebook. And it's like, that's not really enough time when you think about research of patterns and stuff that goes to like 30, 40, 50, hundreds of years, you know?
Yeah.
We've only got 15 years of this experience and what it can do. Like vaping, for example. Vaping's fine. Cigarettes. Sorry, cigarettes. Everyone thought cigarettes was fine. And they even told pregnant women they could smoke cigarettes, but now we know cigarettes are no good. And vaping's better. But we haven't got enough research on vaping to say
whether it's better or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, not me, man, not me. I'm going hella off topic, but it's just something which I started, and now you think you like to talk. Bloody hell, mate. I never shut up. I absolutely never shut up, man. But alongside the pod, what are you working on at the minute, man? Talk to me about your show, the Riverside Radio, right?
That's it, man. Yeah, so I'm a breakfast radio presenter there twice a week. I'm working on a few different projects with them as well, in terms of live hosting and production and brand awareness and stuff like that, which is really amazing. What else am I doing at the minute? I'm doing a lot of live hosting events for a company. I'm also reworking a lot of stuff to reapply for radio, and hopefully get my face in front of a camera soon and get some stuff in ready for a show reel that I can get in hopefully, somewhere that's going to be able to pay me to be a presenter full time. That's the dream, man. That's the dream. What field in presenting would be your ideal thing? Would it be like breakfast TV? Would it be Good Morning next to Phil and Holly, or would it be like MTV? Would it be, I don't know, because now it's not. Would it be hosting Love Island? Would it be being on Love Island? Staying well away from that, mate.
But if they're your type on paper, man, you'll find one who's your type on paper.
Mate, I got approached to do dinner date a little while ago.
Oh yeah,
ITV, So fun. I got offered to do it, and it was literally like 2 days after I'd split up with my ex, and I went, no, I don't think I'm in the right space for this. And I went, okay, maybe in the future. I was like, oh, thanks for holding out hope. But
I reckon you're good. Are you much of a cook?
Yeah, I am, man. I love cooking. Cooking.
There we go. It's fine. Yeah. You'll be fine, because every show now is just dating show. I got offered to be put on Take Me Out.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, it's Rob from London coming down the elevator. But it didn't go on that because I was with someone, so cock block,
absolutely.
But I think all the shows are dating shows. My friend actually got offered to be put on Married at First Sight.
Oh yeah.
But best dating show, man. This is a little hidden one, I'll tell you. Are You the One?
Oh,
Are You the One on Netflix? Now, Are You the One is really interesting because basically it's 10 girls, 10 guys. But prior to going into this house, they do all of these tests, like emotional history, friends, family, ex-relationships, like morals, what's important to them, that sort of stuff. And basically what it is their matches in that house. So, but they don't know who they are. So they have to obviously figure out who their match is. Yeah. And then they have this thing called the truth booth where they can be voted in, and that will confirm if they're a match. And the idea is they have a matching ceremony every week or whatever, and they have certain beams of lights, and each beam of light is a match, right? And if you get 10 beams of light, you get £1 million, which is split amongst these 10 people. Yeah. Or 10 girls, 12 guys. So obviously the idea is really good because they're trying to find their match. And obviously some people are more drawn to people who they think is their match because of their previous relationships or their previous stuff. But sometimes their previous relationships haven't worked for a reason. Therefore, this person is very interesting. My mate got me on it. After Love is Blind, of course. Yeah. Love is Blind and those two. there. He's actually sending me right now. I bet you only he sent me like 6 videos. Basically, because I've already seen it. So he's watching it now and he's sending me like videos, narrating it. So
right.
narrating each person and stuff. So, but I think it's just more, it's less Love Island and more like emotionally charged, as opposed to Love Island's a bit more impulse driven.
Yeah, impulse and physical.
I'm telling you, man, go on there, man. Go on there.
No.
Go on there, man. Get that blue tick. You'll get your blue tick.
Yeah, get that blue tick
on the end, man. But what I'm doing is I'm not going to keep it too long, man. And I will obviously, I'm going to let you go because I know you've had a long day, but it was good. And thanks for the waiting whilst we sorted out the delay. But it was really good to sit down and talk with you, man. And I really appreciate you sharing all that, all of your experiences. Especially those which are a bit more dear to your heart in regards to you know, personal loss and tragedy. I really appreciate that. And just if you've got anything, if you could give some advice to any men or boys who are struggling with their mental health or want to find resources, or any kind of advice that you give them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I could give is vulnerability is strength. Don't think that hiding away, bottling things up and doing, you know, all the stuff that you're supposed to be doing is the answer. It's not, because that is where we get the statistics that we do of people taking their own life. So my biggest thing is just use this for the right reasons. You don't have to spread hate. You can just spread joy, positivity, but use whatever's in here needs to come out of here. That's what your body's supposed to do. Obviously sometimes you need a filter, but but yeah, the biggest thing is just open up, talk to people. You know, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then and you maybe want to get some more professional advice, then you can see your GP. There's some amazing charities out there like Shout and Mind and Samaritans that have text services as well. So if you feel like you can't physically talk about it because it's too much pressure, then text through, because you text, as I said earlier, you text a mate about Jamie Vardy banging in 3 goals. Why not text into someone that could actually change your life and help you out? So yeah, just keep communicating, keep the conversations going, and just keep releasing the stigma is the biggest thing for me.
Brilliant, man. Thank you for sharing, man, and thank you for sitting down with me and talking it through, man. I really enjoyed this,
mate. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been so good to chat to you.
You too, man. Well, I'll speak to you soon, man.
Yeah, man, definitely.
All right, take it easy, man. Peace.
Cheers, man. Thank you.